We've all heard the story of the wolf in sheep's clothing, either as a fable or from an idiom of biblical origin. But today I got an email asking me to perhaps play the role of a sheep in wolf's clothing. I'm not so sure I should put a video out about this, but given the irony of the circumstance and situation, and given that you, the YouTube followers that watch so much of our content and have a lot to say often, I thought it's an interesting thing to put out and just invite commentary and other people's insights on, because there's some people that probably know far more about policy level decision making and, you know, some of the companies in question with what I'm about to share. I got an email from Janez Potočnik, who is a Slovenian politician who was serving as the European Commissioner for the Environment up until November 2014. And it's an invitation to speak at the Future of Agriculture Forum in Brussels in March next year. And the theme of the forum is about achieving food and environmental security. And it's a high-level event based around the key elements of world agricultural sector and its evolution in the future. Now, it's got a lot of strong European business and political network influence, and is run via the European Landowners Organization. And they're particularly interested in our farm, and let me just find here that they want to see concretely how our systems work and for us to go and showcase how our farm is functioning. And they think that the audience in the room and those watching online, this is a global event, which I'll talk more about, will find it very interesting. Not only farmers around Europe, but especially inspiring to young farming community and also for EU policymakers. That sounds all great and good, and I'm particularly passionate about supporting young farmers getting into this stuff. And when I opened their homepage, the Forum for the Future of Agriculture is in the links below. It's certainly a high-level event. This is in one of the biggest conference facilities in Brussels. And last year it was the keynote speaker to open the event was Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan was the Ghanaian diplomat who was the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations from 1997 until 2006, and he was the co-recipient of the Nobel Prize along with the UN in 2001. But there's a message from His Holiness Pope Francis and a lot of heavyweight political and business people. Interestingly, there's a keynote from Dame Ellen MacArthur, who I'm well aware of for her world record breaking attempt, I think in 2005, for the fastest solo circumnavigation around the globe, who's since put a lot of her... She runs a foundation that promotes the acceleration towards the circular economy. Like looking at sort of cradle-to-cradle concepts in industry, etc., which is a very interesting and important topic. And then there's Alan Savory, who we know as the president of the Savory Institute. And yeah, I got very curious because this is an event that's sort of way above my board in terms of what I promote in the regenerative agriculture movement. What's interesting to me is the first thing I see at the top of this website is its initiative from the European Landowners Organization and Syngenta. Syngenta, the big chemical company, Swiss company, it's got a $13.4 billion US turnover with profits exceeding $1.4 billion. And over 18 billion assets with something like 30,000 employees around the world. Their main products are what? Well, first, let's look at their website and see what they say. Most of us have heard of people like Monsanto, Syngenta, and aware that their corporate identity is being greenwashed because of the bad rep of chemicals and GMOs, etc. So Syngenta say we are a business that helps humanity face its toughest challenge: how to feed a rising population sustainably. World-class science, innovative crop solutions, enabling millions of growers to make better use of available resources. Interesting, because nearly all the things they sell require people to come back to them. So bear in mind, this is a company that sells primarily herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, genetically modified seeds, probably Terminator seeds, and the business of world food security just depends on natural, sustainable resource use, healthy ecosystems, and thriving local communities. Well, I stand for all that, but I gotta say, I can't imagine my ethics and guiding principles are in line with this corporate giant. Interestingly, the Syngenta were taken over. They have a parent company, China, which is a parent company is basically someone that has enough voting stock or shares to control a board of directors, essentially, and steer the company. Now, China apparently were bidding something like $43 billion for this deal, which was the largest ever foreign purchase by a Chinese firm ever. It's a state-owned company, and there's talks this year of them merging with another state-owned chemical company, Sinochem, for a deal worth something like $120 billion. So, you know, here I am in a little 10-hectare farm in Värmland promoting shoestring budget beyond organic regenerative soil building techniques, being invited to speak at an event that is promoted by one of, you know, companies that are in the Fortune 500 list. And what concerns me, I mean, we look at like their websites more, what we do. We provide products and solutions to help farmers achieve global food security for a growing population sustainably. We look at agriculture through the eyes of the growers. World-class science, crop protection products and seeds. We try and help farmers overcome multiple challenges, from weeds, insects and disease to the effects of heat and cold on crops. So it's basically chemicals, or, you know, hybridized seeds or genetically modified seeds. To minimize the use of precious natural resources. What are all these chemicals made of? It's, you know, they are focused on corn, wheat, soy, all these major crops that make up 70-80% of the world food supply now, that you find in every product in a supermarket shelf. At the heart of our business, innovation, ethical operations, and collaborative mindset. Now that collaboration, you know, it's interesting where that leads, because it certainly leads towards lobbying. And what concerns me is the partner organisation, the European Landowners Organisation. If you look at their website, is they recommend like some pretty, you know, maybe okay organisations, sister organisations, but they also up at the top of their recommendations is the Rise Foundation. They've definitely received over €1 million from Syngenta, and Syngenta are there themselves, and there's some other dubious elements to their support network. You know, Syngenta, if you look up Syngenta lawsuits, you know, there's been big cases with genetically modified corn in the States, and there are just too many to speak about. One that's familiar to me is the work of Tyrone Hayes from the University of California, Berkeley. He was running experiments, you might remember from the film Flow, For the Love of Water. It's a film I like to show people when we're studying water in our trainings. But he was studying atrazine, which is a chemical made by Syngenta that's banned in Europe, sold all over America, and it's moved in the water in the hydrological cycle. And he was studying how it sexually it basically demasculinized frogs and started to make them feminine even. He got shut down and had a lot of problems. He was actually, I think, funded at some point by Syngenta, who have done a lot of studies on their own products. So they got research funding in Europe, for example, to look at bee health. And there's overwhelming evidence, it's pretty obvious, that insecticides have led to the wiping out of a lot of bee populations. But some of these massive corporations obviously are doing that research themselves. So what I found interesting is coming across some of these corporate watch sites. And this is several years old, but it's talking about... it's exposing the power of corporate lobbying in the EU, and Syngenta have been behind the Forum for the Future of Agriculture every year. And this is an event held at a very luxurious venue, and reportedly corporate propaganda, lines the corridors, and there's the co-optation of all the co-organisers, there's lobbyists in the room. And civil society is not really present. If you look at the speakers, it's a lot of heavyweight politicians, and it's it's similar to, I mean, the European Landowners Association has definitely got ties with Syngenta, and it's interesting. Like, I read through a report from the Corporate Watch about the reforming of the Common Agricultural Policy, which is, by the way, 40% of the EU's budget in agricultural sectors, and it's a lot of important decision makers on the issue. So commissioners for agriculture and environment and MEPs that are playing crucial roles in the decision making there, and basically, back in 2011, I think it was, when they were looking at the Common Agricultural Policy, there was no environmental NGOs, no public interest groups, no representatives at all of even the organic farming unions, and no consumer associations were invited to speak at all. And it's promoted as a meeting place for those who have a stake in the future of agriculture, and, transpired to be a tightly orchestrated lobbying event for Syngenta to polish its image and promote its agenda for the reform of EU agricultural policies to essentially support their corporate aims, which is, it's common all over the world. We're all familiar with these things and how those big power structures play out. And it's, it's certainly been something I've been aware of for years, is the greening of the image of all of these big companies, trying to sort of hijack the regenerative agriculture or alternative organic agricultural movements. And we've seen it even in Facebook groups of people trolling from those organizations. Back in 2011, the report was looking at one of the big PR campaigns was about Operation Pollinator. Syngenta in the UK had been funding the British Beekeepers Association, which basically since then endorsed several pesticides as bee friendly, and they also received research funding in the UK to document the decline of the bee population. And whilst there's no doubt a lot of strong evidence that these irreplaceable insects are being wiped out by industrial use of pesticides, you can safely assume that this is a way for Syngenta to try and deter criticism and prevent research that would endanger its profits, basically. Syngenta have a history of running events like this, like all these big corporations, and contracting in PR companies who, make fronting groups for them that make it look like they have activities, invested interest in all kinds of things that they don't necessarily. I mean, the simple reason why the ELO are probably involved in this event is, basically funding. It's Syngenta have been the biggest financial contributor to the Rise Foundation, having donated €1 million. And so you could say Syngenta have purchased the ELO's privileged access to EU decision makers and used their image to, essentially polish their own. It's even been reported that, some of the marketing or some of the speech within the event was how this was not about an industry event. and quotes of like transparency is in Syngenta's DNA. And the reason I'm putting this out is I want to hear what people think. We're all aware of these sort of dubious elements of companies like this, and on one level, I'm excited to go and talk at something like this, to just be a wild card, to stand up in the face of that and just speak my truth. I feel like we live in such a paradoxical time, such an interesting age, and the only way to navigate that is just stand up and speak clearly, truthfully, and not bend yourself to anyone else's ideas and notions of what lays forth. I don't want to go into it naive and ignorant, and I'm pretty aware of some of these issues, and I'm aware of how insignificant my contribution could be to this sort of global forum of elitist politics and corporate activities, and yet some part of me finds it intriguing, to put on wolf's clothing and go in there as a sheep and speak some things, and let me know what you think. I'm very interested of your different insights. I know people will relate to this very, very differently, and I feel very mixed about it, actually, and I'm not sure if it's wise to talk about these things in this way, but it's what naturally arose for me. I think it's important discussions, and there's conversations that can happen outside this event that would never take place in the event. I think a lot of this sort of event is corporate schmoozing and talking about problems, and very little talk about solutions. It's more trying to open gateways to allow for policies to be developed that support corporate interests through leaning, and the opportunity to sort of pull out research funding for dubious means. And so I guess some of you viewing this will have a lot deeper insight into some of these things, and I'd love to hear your opinion. Should I go? Should I turn up? Should I go and preach my bit about regenerative ag and soil building from a real, ethically based ecosystem perspective? That's all I got for today. Thanks for watching, and excited to read the comments. And please, I'd love to hear some inputs and thoughts on that. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.